Brothers and sisters, our last presenter today, our last speaker today, Sheikh Syed Ali Imran, specially traveled from Canada to be here with us for this session. Sheikh, we are really thankful and honored by your presence. For those who do not know, Sheikh Syed Ali is an educator, Hausa graduate, and community leader focused on tarbiyah, identity, and cultivating a confident Shia Muslim presence in the West. He studied in Qom for 10 years, completed postgraduate Islamic studies at the Islamic College London, and holds a master's in education from the University of Toronto. He taught advanced Kharij in Asul and Fiqh, and now serves as head of Al-Hadi School in Toronto while teaching at Mufid Seminary. It is my honor to invite Sheikh Syed Ali to address us on the topic mental health and emotional well-being through the lens of Nahjul Balagha. Please welcome Sheikh with a loud salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Just before I begin, just a quick correction. I did not teach Bahth al-Kharij. That's what I heard. I think I attended Bahth al-Kharij, so that's a pretty big blunder. In case anybody has any doubts, I'm about to do some ijtihad or something here. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, dear scholars, dear guests, brothers and sisters, children. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, keeping in mind the time and maybe the exhaustion for some of you, the topic that I've been given the honor to present is mental health, well-being through the lens of Nahjul Balagha. It was a daunting task to be asked to present on Nahjul Balagha. I am remembering one of my teachers in the Hausa who would begin every single class with the saying of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam from the Nahjul Balagha. And today I feel that I'm seeing the benefits of those classes that I would attend, and today I was told that Maulana Alavi has been teaching for almost 2 decades. And I get requested as well in my community, Sayyid Ali, please start Nahjul Balagha. And I always tell them that it's a very difficult book to teach. And even just the Arabic itself is very difficult to decipher. And both Sheikh Ismail and Maulana Ali Raza mentioned that Ibn Abil Hadid, the Mu'tazili scholar, he says that the kalam of Amir al-Mu'mineen is above the kalam of Bashar, but under the kalam of Allah. But there's also something else he says in the commentary of sermon number 91, where Amir al-Mu'mineen describes the angels. And Ibn Abil Hadid says, my pen is breaking looking at the description that Imam Ali alayhi salam has mentioned regarding the angels. And he says, how could the Sahaba describe the angels in such an eloquent way? And then he says, even if the Sahaba could write the prose and basically elaborate themselves in the meter and the rhyme and the prose in which Amir al-Mu'mineen has done so in this khutbah, where will they get the knowledge to fill those containers and the meters and the prose that Amir al-Mu'mineen has? So it's a lose-lose battle to try to go up against the Nahjul Balagha and the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So before I begin, obviously mental health is a sensitive topic. I'm not here to talk about actual medical conditions that anybody may have that pertain to mental health. This is a general discussion regarding well-being, psychological well-being, and because of my role as a principal at the school, this is something that we deal with all the time in schools. Just to kind of start off with the story, I joined our school in Toronto about 5 years ago. It's an Islamic school. And we had some kids joining in from public schools. And I'm talking about year 6, year 7, year 5. And these kids did not know the times table, okay? And I know all you UK people are like freaking out, you know, what kind of kids do you have in Canada? You know, 15 years ago, the Liberal Party had won the elections in Ontario. And they got rid of the multiplication times table from the Ontario curriculum in the elementary schools, from the younger age. So these kids who had gone through year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, when they were joining our schools, they didn't know the times table. And the reason for that was because the Liberals had added something called SEL, social emotional learning, in the math curriculum. And they said that children are experiencing a lot of anxiety and nervousness when they learn the times table. So their solution, hey, let's just get rid of it, okay? And that's the Western modern way of dealing with challenges, that, hey, I have a feeling, I have this anxiety, and you must validate my experiences, and you better come up with a solution, right? A sort of a defeatist solution, because I'm, you know, going through this feeling, and you better accept it. You better be careful, you know, of calling me out, or calling me weak, or calling me poor, or calling me, quite frankly, illiterate. You know, so they got rid of that, and they replaced it with SEL. So my point here is that there's this whole idea of emotional well-being, but if it is not looked at correctly, or if it is looked at from the way that the modern world expects you to look at, you're going to have a lot of problems. Okay, you will never find a solution. So what you find today in our world is, isn't it such an amazing, astonishing thing that if I ask all of you, have the conveniences of our lives, have they improved in the last century, or have they gotten worse? Just the mere conveniences. Travel, I just came yesterday and I'm flying out tomorrow, you know, and I'm not missing, you know, just maybe one day of work. I have not missed any day. This travel would have taken me months, right, to do. So the conveniences of communication, of traveling, of everything, of our jobs, of our, you know, our jobs that we do, of medical, you know, doctor recited the poetry. I thought it was a PhD doctor, but mashallah, you know, he's a doctor, right? So, you know, the way that surgeries are done, all of these things are much more convenient. So how is it that psychological issues and mental health issues have increased when the conveniences of lives have improved? So it shows that there's a big problem in the way that the world is observing and analyzing, you know, their experiences. So instead, what we find is people burnt out. Oh, Syed, Maulana, you know, 9 to 5, I'm at work. Yeah, you know, even that's a convenience. People used to travel for months to do business. Even that 9 to 5, in some sense, is a sort of a convenience. Yeah, but I'm burnt out. I'm stressed out. You know, I can't balance, I can't manage my finances, my family, my kids, my spouse. All of these things are creating a lot of issues in our communities, in our personal lives, in our family lives, you know, with our relationships with our friends, community, and children. So we notice that, you know, the modern life is full of stress, and it's all to do with the mind, right? Financial pressures, illness, you know, loss. For example, how do we deal with loss? How do we navigate loss? Uncertainty, doubts. One of the biggest reasons for, mental, not well-being is the doubts that we live in. We can't be sure about anything, as the modern world tells us that there's no certainty. The default assumption is doubt. We don't know anything, right? And then relationship conflicts. So why is it that if my grandmother or my grandfather or my ancestors, they lived in a village on the outskirts of Rawalpindi, for example, and I've visited some of those, whatever remnants are left, and I look at their lifestyle. I'm like, wait, they did not even have plumbing for washrooms. They would have to walk to the fields to use the washrooms. Why is it that they did not collapse under such extreme circumstances? Sometimes we read about the ulama of Najaf in the last 100 years, and sometimes, as we mentioned context many times, we sometimes forget many of those Maraji were living under World War I, World War II. There were wars and battles happening. Inside their country, the Iraqi governments were involved with the British and so on, yet they produced some of their most magnificent works during these periods. So wait, sometimes we forget that these ulama were living these tough lives, okay? So how come they didn't collapse, but we collapse, so easily? What? I have, work to do and, I can't manage it. Okay, so inshallah, we're going to try and analyze some of this. Now, I have all the Arabic of all of the quotations. I'll see if I need to quote something, but otherwise I'll stick to the English for now, for today's presentation. Look, Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahjul Balagha highlights some overarching reasons for why you may be feeling a sort of unease with yourselves. Okay, so there will be some overarching reasons, and then there will be specific examples that I will also mention and I'll cite. So number one is the fact that, we are not understanding that this world is a world of temporariness, okay? Because look, the modern human does not want to accept that fact. Because for the modern world, for the modern insan, who's not a mu'min, it is very, very scary to come to the realization that once you die, that's it. You will cease to exist. And because we grow up in the West, we are subconsciously trained to also think like that. We go to schools, we go through our education systems. The language by which we are learning and growing, there's no mention of akhirah, there's no mention of that this world is temporary, none of it. So at a subconscious level, we are also trained to look at the world and to analyze the world and to calculate the impact of our decisions in the same way, okay? Whereas Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying that, look, in this dunya, you are the target of calamities. It's going to come. This is the world of tension. In alamul madda, in the material world, it is in the very nature of the material world that there will be conflict and there will be tensions. Okay, so at the very least, we should be sure that there is going to be no utopia in this world. Okay, even in the time of the 12th Imam, Ajalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif, there will be no utopia, guys. There will be justice. Justice will be administered, but there will be crime, there will be people making mistakes and so on. Okay, so we understand that. The second thing that is a repetitive theme in the Nahjul Balagha is the attachment to the dunya, right? Sometimes you see certain topics pop up a lot more in the times of certain A'immah. With Amir al-Mu'mineen, the dunya is a big theme. You don't find that much emphasis like that in later ahadith. It's because the Imam was ruling as a Khalifa, and the majority of the issues that were happening around his companions, around his friends, were all dunya related. Okay? Money, khilafat, power, war, Baytul Mal, the wealth that is coming into the Muslim lands because of the futuhat that are happening. People are after the dunya. These Talha and Zubayr that were referenced today, these were some of the earliest companions of the Holy Prophet. From a young age, they were with the Prophet. They had scars on their bodies from the battles of Uhud and Khandaq and later battles. In fact, they used these scars to convince people in Jamal. They said, look, we have scars with the Holy Prophet. But what shook them? Dunya. At the end of their lives, right? So that's another thing. And the third point, as I mentioned, that the tension and the pressures are inseparable from the dunya itself. So let's first correct our mindset. As Amir al-Mu'mineen says, this world is Darul Bala. Okay, that's the very definition. This world is the world of trial and tribulations and calamities. Okay, so if I understand that, if I know that this is how it's going to be, okay, so now when issues will come in my life, when challenges will come in my life, I will deal with them and I will look at them and I will interpret them very differently. Okay, so that's kind of obvious now. So let's look at a couple of specific examples he mentions throughout the Nahjul Balagha. Right? What are some reasons people have emotional breakdowns, psychological breakdowns? Many reasons. For example, poverty. There's a lot of references to orphans and widows, people who are poor, illnesses, physical illnesses, okay? And these are reasons why people could be feeling uneasy, that there's no well-being in their lives because they're poor, for example. Or they're feeling a sense of humiliation in the society because of their status. Second thing, one example he mentions is the separation from the family. This one is very beautiful. Okay? Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min wa'tha'is safar. Oh Allah, I seek protection from you from the hardships of the journey and from the grief of returning and from the scenes of devastation of property of men. Okay? So separation from the family. He says, oh Allah, you are my companion during my journey when I'm away from my family. So he's acknowledging that separation from family will create a little bit of unease. For months people would travel, right? Months people would travel. You wouldn't even know if your spouse is alive. You would figure out sometimes many years later. Okay. Number 3, and this one, the Imam speaks from his heart. He says, another thing that creates issues and stress is the disloyalty of friends. Okay, disloyalty of friends. I mean, I don't know if I need to explain that any further, but you know, the most painful, we just did a play on Julius Caesar in school. And you know, and Brutus says, Caesar says, et tu Brute, you know, you too Brutus. And I explained to the kids, I said, look, this is the most painful line that Julius Caesar says because he did not expect it from his friend. The rest of the people he expected from them, that he will get stabbed. But when his friend comes, the disloyalty that his friend shows, that creates the most uneasiness in him. Okay, so disloyalty of friends, losing a supporter, losing a protector, and this is specifically, he mentions this when he talks and complains to the Holy Prophet about the loss of his wife, Lady Fatima, salamullah alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You know, loss of a loved one. He says, oh Prophet, you know, this was an amana that you had entrusted me with her, and I have returned her back, you know, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he talks about the pain that he's feeling at the loss of a loved one, okay, and a protector. So these are some misdaq, some examples that Amir al-Mu'mineen says about things that can create, you know, in people's lives, challenges and so on. Okay, so these are, okay, that's good enough. So now what do I do with it? Different psychologists will, look, what do psychologists generally do? They apply frameworks, okay? They have certain frameworks by which they will have, you know, conversations with the patient, for example, to get them to think in a certain way. That's the name of the game, okay? To get them to think in a certain way. And of course, now if you are a believer, a mu'min, you have a certain worldview, then you will think in a different way, okay? As opposed to somebody who does not believe in the akhirah, masalan, does not believe in any accountability, then you will think in a different way. It's kind of obvious. Now, one of the frameworks that is used is sort of like a 2-3 step process. And this can increase the level of stress or can decrease it depending on how you go through these steps. Number 1 is every individual, whenever you encounter a conflict or a challenge or a tension, you evaluate the environment and the situation. Okay, first you figure out what has even happened. Did I just lose someone in my family? Did I lose my job? Did I lose a family member? You know, look at the children and people in Gaza, masalan, or other countries in Iran getting bombed. Like, what is happening exactly? Right? What's the situation that I am in? And then you judge, is this a harmful event? Is it a beneficial event? Is it a, irrelevant event? That's the first stage. The second stage is, and this is the important part, because look, the event itself is not the thing that's going to cause the stress. Okay, the event itself doesn't cause the stress. It's the second stage where you see, okay, this event has happened. What are the resources that I have at my disposal? And what is the knowledge level that I have at my disposal by which I will interact with this event? What is the relationship between me and this event? Okay, so I work, let's say at school, some of you are probably in corporate work jobs. Let's say a really big crisis happens at work. The person who is very experienced, they will look at an event and they will say, okay, I've seen this dozens of times, okay? If a doctor sees a patient coming in with, needs some very serious surgery, the family will be stressing out. The doctor will be like, okay, this is the 50th patient I've done this surgery on, for example. So, okay, so they evaluate their relationship with that event. And then the third stage is they appraise it. Okay, so either they're going to say, oh man, I cannot deal with this. I do not have the resources, or I do not have the knowledge, and that will create a level of stress. I mean, it should, okay? Hopefully it does, because that level of stress itself is sometimes very good. Like, you know something is wrong, you need to go find a solution for it. Okay, or you might say, no, alhamdulillah, I've dealt with this many times, I've seen this situation many times. These are the resources I have with me, and I will deal with it, for example, in X and Y way, for example. So these are the three steps. Now, how does Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam guide us to the same steps? He says, the biggest problem is that man asbaha ala dunya hazinan faqad asbaha liqada'illahi sakhita. He says, he condemns those individuals who see an event and they analyze the event and they look at their resources in relationship to the event on a surface level. Okay? And this is the problem all of us have. He says, hey, when you are saddened by an event, when something has happened and you become angry at it, okay, many of us, something happens, we get angry. He says, it is as if you are angry with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're angry with the decree, and if you complain about it, it is as if you are complaining against God, na'udhu billah. It is as if you are complaining against God. He's basically telling us, stop looking at events at a sathi level, at a surface level. Brothers and sisters, it just takes a moment of reflection on our own lives to realize how many events have happened in our lives which we initially thought were bad, negative. Sometimes years later, we realize, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, that negative, what I thought was negative, alhamdulillah, that happened, and it got me to this stage where I am right now in life. So many. But because we do not reflect, and the Quran repeatedly says to be people of reflection, we forget, we become ghafil, we become heedless. And what do? A new event happens, same old style, okay, evaluating things from a surface level. Okay, well, that's going to create your stress, of course. It's going to ruin your night, it's going to ruin your sleep. Okay, so what does he say instead? He says, no, have a deeper interpretation of the events that you are experiencing. Now, I have to say that there is no way to do this except by raising your own bar higher. Okay? You cannot do it without increasing your knowledge and ma'arifah. In fact, from the Islamic paradigm, the worldview, your value in the Quran, obviously it says taqwa. But even taqwa, how are you supposed to increase it? Through ilm. As some of the hukama, philosophers say, your value is basically judged on your knowledge, your ilm. In fact, if you are not gaining knowledge, you're just like the cattle and the animals, balhum, adal, worse than them. So I have this event happening, negative event. Okay, somebody has passed away, I've become an orphan or something, very, very dangerous event. And I start complaining. Okay, so I'm looking at the world as just this, this event has happened and now my life is done. Okay, but if I change my interpretation, that okay, this was a world of calamities, this type of thing is to be expected, that Allah can test me in a certain way, or Allah may have a good wisdom in this specific event in me, maybe through this tension and maybe through this difficulty I will improve. How else are you supposed to improve? If there's no difficulty in your life, how can you go to the next level? This is basic, rule of life. You cannot increase your strength unless you lift heavier weights. You cannot increase your spirituality unless you increase the difficulty of the spiritual ibadah that you're acting in. This is very basic. So in fact, sometimes or many times you need that difficulty to get you higher. And the Quran also says that Allah is testing you to see who is better, who has more taqwa, who is purer, for example, who is going to get more purified. So the Imam says, Inna dunya daru sidqin liman sadaqaha. That the dunya actually is the abode of truth. The things that are happening are the haqq. Acknowledge them and try to understand them beyond just, oh, why did Allah do this to me? That's our default response. And I mean, maybe somebody can look into the historical dimension of this and see maybe this has become exaggerated in the modern world more so, because there is no concept of God in our societies. So it's an easy thing to blame, right? Oh, just blame it on God. That Imam says, this world is the abode of truth for those who are truthful with it. If you are living in delusion, then it will be a problem for you. But if you are truthful with it, it will be the abode of truth. And it is a dwelling. وَدَارُ عَافِيَةٍ. Afiyah is one of the words used for mental health, well-being, by the way, in Arabic. Afiyah is one of the words. وَدَارُ عَافِيَةٍ لِمَنْ فَهِمَ عَنْهَا. It is a place of well-being for those who understand it. So what does that require from us? A higher level of understanding. And I always mention, this could be, I hope it is not my bias, it is a point of truth, that we have to shift our communities from what I call tabligh-based communities, which have been the trend for last few decades, to tadris-based communities. And mashallah, now many cities and many ulama are doing this, right? They have the time and resources to move towards tadris-based communities. And those communities where tadris is the asal, where the level of the people is higher, you can see a difference. But if the asal is tabligh-based and tadris is just a side thing, okay, then over there in those communities you can see there's a lot of issues, a lot of problems. You will observe around the world, okay? Now, inshallah, if I were to conclude, what are some strategies that are there in Nahjul Balagha? Now, brothers and sisters, there's so many. So instead what I decided to do is to categorize them, because these are found all over different khutbahs, short statements, and even some of the letters. So I decided to categorize them into 4, okay, strategies that he says. So I'll mention them quickly and I'll break down some of them. Number 1 is, meaning and perspective. How do you interpret the world? Everything is a game of interpretation. I teach English literacy as well. That's how we start the class. Boys and girls, everything is an interpretation of the world. Everything has meaning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world with meaning. Okay, everything has a meaning. That's why he says, these are ayat for those who think. Okay, so I'm supposed to look at a star and the star means something. It's an ayah, it's a sign. It's dalalat, bas of dalalat, as in Hawza. So that means it means something. Okay, so everything has a meaning. Second is going to be community support. This is extremely important, especially nowadays for our youngsters, right? With the elders, your level of support that you all needed was quite different than the type of support that the youngsters today need, especially in the Western world, because they are getting more and more alienated from who they truly are. Just a few days ago, one of the boys in our class, younger class, he says, "Brother Ali, I'm Canadian." I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" He's like, I'm like, "Are you like white?" He's like, "No, I'm Pakistani." So, "Okay, so you're Pakistani?" He's like, "No, but I'm born here." So I said, "Okay, so everyone born here is Canadian. Some people are born here, they're not Canadian." Confused. At the end, he reduced it down to maple syrup. He said, maple syrup. I said, "Okay," so I said, brother, it's just the construct. It's just the construct. So actually, I realized he doesn't know who he is. That's majority of the kids, brothers and sisters. So they're alienated. So what do they need? They need a very strong, solid community network. Yaqeen Institute, one of the famous institutes in the Sunni world in the US, did a research about reasons why people and the youth are leaving Islam. One of the biggest factor was lack of community support. One of the biggest reasons. Okay, so this is important. This is all afiyah, this is well-being. Kids getting depressed, people getting anxiety, they can't answer questions. Amir al-Mu'mineen will address this in some of his khutbahs. Number 3 is your amal, action. Right? And what we mean by action is sort of having these multidimensional approaches. So I'll quote one of them. For example, we mentioned the smile, and it's very good. Amir al-Mu'mineen also mentions this, that the joy of a believer is apparent on their face, while the sorrow remains hidden in the heart. Right? And the idea here is that, he says in another similar statement, that sometimes when you show this happiness or show this joy or show this patient, it will transform you into the patient person. It will be able to transform you. And the last one is prayer and spirituality. وَادْفَعُوا أَمْوَاجَ الْبَلَاءِ بِالدُّعَاءِ. Okay, repel the calamities with the dua. Unfortunately, even this culture is not very prevalent amongst the youth. I said something in our community that, the only time we get together as a community for dua is Laylatul Qadr, maybe Dua Arafah, maybe A'mal Dawood. For those of you who are able to do A'mal Dawood, hum se nahi hota. But there's A'mal for every month. Zul Hijjah, Zul Qa'dah, Rajab, there's A'mal. Why don't we gather on all of those nights? Why just Laylatul Qadr? Actually, we have to develop a culture. We don't have this culture. So only time we have the himmat to stay up for Amal is just Laylatul Qadr. But the whole Mafati is full of Amal nights. So we should make an effort. So supplication and prayer. I'll just quote, maybe one or two because I don't want to go through all of them. But I want to just focus on the first one because for me it's the most important one, our interpretation. That Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "O people, fear Allah during times of ease, just as you fear Him during times of hardship and calamity." And we have multiple narrations, even from other A'imma alayhimus salam, that obviously we only go to Allah when we are in hardship. When we are in ease, we forget about Him. He says, no, go to Him even when you're at ease. Meaning, look at the world from the lens of His rahmah, His mercy. And I think one of the best examples of this is the statement of Lady Zainab Salamullah alayha, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, in the court of Ibn Ziyad, where he says to her, look at what Allah has done to you and your brother. And we all know this. She says, Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. Now, of course, ulama have done commentaries on this, but at a very simple level, it is an interpretation that she's giving. And the enemies are interpreting the event from a different lens. And look at how and she's the daughter, obviously, of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So look at how she interprets the whole event, the whole battle of Karbala. She has seen everything, all of the things we're saying. It's pain and misery and hardship and calamity. She should be in depression. No, she said it was beautiful. I mean, this is a very high level for us, but at least, I'm trying to say that it's not just statements of Amir al-Mu'mineen. These are the practical examples in his lineage, in his progeny that we can look up to. So there's that. There's sabr. Sabr is very important in our tradition to sort of regulate your emotional well-being. Patience is very key. Sometimes letting go of things. An event has happened, somebody had a fight with me, we never let go. And I think mostly amongst the elders, this is a problem sometimes. Purane fights, 30 saal, 40 saal pehle hue hain. Kids are like, Mama, Baba, bas kare, leave it. But you notice that, it eats the heart. Because 40 years later, you're still like, yes, us tumhare falan uncle ne meri zameen li thi or something. Kids are like, mate, I don't know, I didn't get nothing from that zameen, but my point is that if you hold grudges, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, look, let go of things. Move on. Life is too short for you to worry about, what happened. And then finally, I'll give one more example. I mentioned the social network. One final one. So Sheikh Ismail mentioned something on the slide that do not go into things with confusion. Go with certainty. This is 100% correct. So sort of in that context, Amir al-Mu'mineen also says that sometimes when you have a difficult situation in front of you, throw yourself into it. But I want to just sort of contextualize it by saying not when there's confusion or any harm, but a simple example would be, you have to give a speech. So much anxiety and nervousness and stress before the day of the speech, for example. But after you give it, after you throw yourself into it, you give it, you're like, okay, that wasn't too bad. I'll do it again. That's what he means here. That, hey, sometimes you have a challenging situation, your emotional well-being is not regulated. You know what? Sometimes just put yourself in the deep end. As they say, put yourself in the deep end. When you come out successful from that, you will realize, wow, I've gained a level. I've developed my resilience. And inshallah, you will do it again. You will do it even better. So Khair, that's all I wanted to share. I know time is up and I've covered a lot. I hope the main gist of my speech from the Nahjul Balagha on emotional well-being, mental health, inshallah, I hope it was beneficial. These are quite common issues in our communities, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve all of us from these type of miseries and anxieties, inshallah, and give us all afiyah. بحق أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers and sisters, we will now open the floor for questions. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you very much. Just some clarifications about the calamities that we face.
Yeah.
There is a danger from a interpretation of calamities that is predestined, and I've just got to accept it. If I do not accept it, it's going to cause me mental stress and all of that. How do you separate predestination from something that I or others have control over?
I mean, we do not believe, we obviously there is this idea of Allah having decreed for us and Allah having knowledge of what is going to happen in our lives. But obviously we do not believe that we do not have any free will. We have free will. And the very basic example that the scholars will give and the teachers will give is just like a case of a teacher right in school. Like, I know which kid's going to pass, right? And I can tell you that this kid is not going to pass because I have knowledge of how they are the entire year. But that does not, I have not taken anything from that child's irada. They could have gone and studied masalan. Now, this example is just tashbih, meaning my knowledge of that student. So we're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has mutlaq knowledge. So there is no actual conflict between knowledge, ilm of something and the irada of something. And many people, somehow they see there's a conflict. There's no conflict. If somebody can explain to us the conflict, maybe we can address it. But between ilm, knowledge of something, and irada of something, these are two different concepts. And there's no conflict of either of them. Yeah.
I think there's one question from the district.
Alaikum salam.
When it comes to these strategies, these are obviously key, but we are human and we slip. So what advice would you give in the moment, like when we do feel overwhelmed because of events?
Yeah.
What advice would you give in the moment, and also what advice would you give to the community to help people to do these strategies?
So, obviously it depends on the severity of the event. I think, for example, and I'll give you an example from our community. We had a Sayyid Asad Jafri, marhum, he passed away. I was there in Toronto, we were there. That was a very severe event. And the staff at our school, we're from his mosque, we were from his masjid. And I myself was just not in the right state of mind. So, and it's almost like, sometimes people come to the ulama, but the ulama also sometimes we need to speak to someone. So I reached out to one of my colleagues from the Hawza and I said, Sayyid, Sayyid Hussain Makki, I said, Sayyid Hussain, you need to take this over because I cannot say anything to my staff. And I myself need consolation. So sometimes you do have to outsource it, but the key over here was that there has to be a period of talking and discussing. Of course, he's very experienced, so he gave us sort of a framework to think of it, and I needed to hear it maybe even more than some of the individuals. So that's a very severe type of event, for example. But even in those situations, we are given some very clear-cut principles, right? Not losing yourself, right? Not losing yourself totally. And to the extent where you might commit a haram or you might say something blasphemous, masalan. So those principles still have to be there, but of course, there's emotional ups and downs. Sometimes, there are basic strategies of, let's say, anger. So we have many riwayat, okay, if you're standing, sit down. If you're, sitting, stand up, drink some water. So these are very basic strategies that are even mentioned in the riwayat. So there's very simple and practical as well. Or go do wudu, for example. These are just basic strategies, but once again, it would depend on the level of severity. I think maybe a lot of communities got experience recently because of the war. Right? I'm sure all the communities dealt with that and sort of navigated. I think that itself should be an experience that we should record. Okay, how do we navigate it? What improvements can we make, maybe for future situations, or what mistakes did we made, masalan. So this is how I would encourage the communities to kind of move forward, inshallah. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So I think you mentioned community support as one of the solutions, I think, to overcome the mental health issues that the youth or
Yeah.
Community may be facing. So if you were to suggest one practical solution for the community in terms of what the community could do
Yeah.
to provide that support, what would that be?
So I don't want to speak on the UK community. Mashallah, you guys have all the ulama are here. But I guess I can maybe speak. I cannot even speak for Toronto community. But anyways, I think the first step is a sort of like an acknowledgement that this issue does exist, right? I think maybe many of our communities are not even at that level yet, or it's quite hush-hush. Issues are happening. Let's not expose it. But the problem is there. So maybe first step should be acknowledgement, and then, brother, second step is then an investment, right? We have one center, for example, in Toronto. They have counselors on site. So people have issues, they go to them, right? We have, mashallah, many counselors in our communities. I'm sure UK has many Shia mu'min and mu'minat who are working in this field. Then as a community, as an organization, you would have to invest in these individuals, give them the sort of space and platform, and of course they need financial support at that time to be able to address some of these issues with the help of the ulama. Many ulama are also qualified and certified in this field, especially now the new wave of scholars that is coming back. Many of them are going into, let's say, psychology, counseling, education, all of these fields. Once again, after the acknowledgement stage, it's going to be the implementation stage, inshallah. I'm getting looks, and I think time is up. Once again, thanks to the organizers, and it was an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Jazakumullah khaira. Thank you, Mulana Sahab, for all your efforts and hard work. But it's an inspiration for me. Maybe if he does dua for me, I should try to start Nahjul Balagha classes as well, inshallah. Thank you.